it is ostensibly an ETF. I mean, the market cap of the company is the market cap of the Bitcoin that they hold. They're basically valuing the business at zero today. So whether you believe in the business or not, you can buy at NAV spot Bitcoin.
Hey guys, welcome back to Everyday Finance. In this video, Yusko discuss about Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. Yusko believe that BlackRock will win in the end because they are essentially a member of the cabal. But there is no chance for the other contenders. They gave their approval for the futures based on either November or December 18th of last year. Whichever day it was November. And you can specify the introduction coincided with the height of the Bitcoin market, and that's because it permits large banks can go short without needing to have a position in the actual. Because commodities and futures markets have always operated in this manner. Gold prices have been manipulated for a very long time by JP Morgan and others, and they've been apprehended several times, yes, and they respond with things like, "Why do you do that when it's against the rules?" And the cost of the fines are smaller than the profit, thus we will continue till the appropriate amount is determined. It's really awful that you can make an asset appear out of thin air and go short. These futures-based goods are what they offered us in order to facilitate price discovery, which is what we have today. And yet, it interferes with the market for tangible Bitcoin spots, and lots of things Yusko discuss, so please watch the video to end. And share, subscribe our channel Everyday Finance. Thanks.
It is ostensibly an ETF. I mean, the market cap of the company is the market cap of the Bitcoin that they hold. They're basically valuing the business at zero today. So whether you believe in the business or not, you can buy at NAV spot Bitcoin, which is pretty cool. And the fact is the SEC is not going to approve a spot ETF anytime soon, my opinion. I think the first one will ultimately be BlackRock because they're kind of part of the cabal. But all the other competitors, no chance. They approved the futures-based one on December 18th of last year, or November 18th, whatever day it was. And I think it was November. And you can pinpoint the peak of the Bitcoin market with that launch. And that's because it allows big banks to go short without having to take an underlying position in the physical. So it's been the case of commodities and futures markets forever. It's why gold prices have been spoofed for so long by JP Morgan and others. They've been caught multiple times. And everyone says, well, why do you do that? It's against the rules. They're like, well, the fines are less than the profit. So we're gonna keep doing it until they fine us the right amount. And so the fact that you can create an asset out of thin air and go short is just bad for price discovery. So that's what we have today. And so these futures-based products are what they gave us, and yet it disrupts demand for physical spot Bitcoin, and I think that's a problem. Eventually, I think they will have to give in. They claim, oh, the markets are too volatile and they're too easy to manipulate. You mean different than Netflix losing $50 billion of market cap in 2 hours overnight while the markets were closed and no one could do anything about it? You mean manipulated differently than that? I mean, so I think the arguments fall on deaf ears, but they don't want the spot ETF to exist. When it does, then there's going to be a great trade to buy GBTC at a big discount before it converts. That'll be a fantastic trade. And buy dollars worth of Bitcoin for 77 cents today. So that's kind of cool. So lots of opportunity coming. I think, at the end of the day, everything we've talked about is inevitable. It'll take longer than we all would like and hope because this then they fight you phase is real. And the incumbents really don't want to be disrupted. And I hearken back to when the horseless carriage came out. The horse-drawn carriages and the buggy whip manufacturers got a law passed in New York City that you had to have a person waving a red flag walk in front of your horseless carriage. That's where the term red flagging comes from. And ridiculous, right? Why did they do that? Well, to slow down the adoption, because who could pay someone to walk in front of their car? Well, I guess if you could afford a car, you could. But today we don't have red flag people walking in front of our cars. Pretty soon we won't have any people walking in front of our cars because they'll be driving themselves and we'll all be inside, doing our work. And ultimately, technological innovation will occur. It's why great platforms like yours exist, to get people to understand how technology evolves and how it impacts all of our lives.
According to Mark Yusko, if you must state that Bitcoin is not a replacement, then it is unable to shield you from the effects of inflation. No, it obviously cannot. After all, converting a failing fiat is the whole point, right? Which all fiats are flawed, correct? In the world's history, there have been 775 paper currencies. 3/2 of them have no lasted longer. Each and every one of them is worth less than it was at the beginning, and each and every one will eventually reach zero, since that is how fiat currencies work. If you choose not to use fiat currency and instead turn it into a deflationary asset, Bitcoin is an inflating asset that will fundamentally fail without don't call it if you want protection from the devaluation of currency. Call it what it is. Inflation, when central banks depreciate their currencies to reduce debt with Bitcoin. You really can secure your valuables, Mark say. Which is why I like it when individuals try to employ propaganda and false information to try to shape a story. And it is so obviously incorrect.
Right? Shakespeare was right. If you have to say it, it's already happened. If you have to say that Bitcoin is not a substitute, can't protect you from the ravages of inflation. No, of course it can. That's the whole point, right? If you convert a failing fiat, of which all fiats fail, right? There have been 775 paper currencies in the history of the world. 3/4 of them no longer exist. Every single one of them is worth less than where it started. And every single one will go to zero. That is the nature of fiat currencies. So if you opt out, if you convert fiat into a deflationary asset instead of an inflationary asset, which is Bitcoin, it will absolutely fundamentally, without question, protect you from the ravages of currency devaluation. Don't call it inflation. Call it what it is. As the central banks devalue their currency to get out of debt, you can protect your assets with Bitcoin. You just can. So I love when people try to use misinformation and propaganda to try to control a narrative. And it's so blatantly obvious that it's wrong. I think they just make themselves look stupid.
Yeah, it is. It's getting to that point where you're starting to see some missteps. At the same time, we're starting to see a little bit of even the legislators, a lot of the, I know obviously here we're in Florida, a little bit different state, but we see a lot of legislators now starting to lean into digital assets in general, at least to the point where they're trying to learn to what's really happening out there. So the likelihood is we'll most likely see some pretty major moves in both the midterms and definitely in the next presidential election, leaning into
Paul, it's a great point. So, Mayor Suarez down in Miami announced at Bitcoin 2022, we were down there with 25,000 of our closest friends. And he said, without announcing his own candidacy, which was clear, he said the next presidential election, 2024, will have 2 pro-Bitcoin candidates. And I 100% agree with him. And this midterm election, I think, is really going to be about 1 or 2 issues. One is gasoline prices, and 2, I think, is Bitcoin and digital assets. And candidates who help with those 2 things, I think, are going to landslide in, and people who go against it are going to lose. And I think it's because the millennial cohort, right, the 83 million millennials, which is now bigger than our generation, the boomers. You're a little bit younger, but maybe on the other side. But my generation, the boomers, we've lost it, and we are going to pass the torch. We're going to pass the baton, and if you don't cater to the digital natives, you're done. You're absolutely done, in my view.
Yeah, for sure. Last question to you, Mark, and that is, do you look at adoption? We've seen a variety of cycles kind of leaning into this. Some have been around legislation. People a lot of times will point to ETFs potentially being kind of that tipping point, even though some people will argue someone like a MicroStrategies really kind of already is an ETF in the sense that you can invest in something that is purely going after digital assets. What are some of the key things that have to happen this year in 2022 for adoption to really see a big curve here?